Well, what have we here? The owner, very nice guy, drove up from Alabama to drop off this Marshall. He thinks it's a 66, and I don't see anything yet that says otherwise. It is a 1973, which is the 2x12 version of the 1974 that Marshall later reissued. So it's a very nice amp usually, and will be again soon. He's had some problems, especially on the first channel, and just some general stuff. We're going to get it all tip-top shape. As you can see by this blue painter's tape here, this is not the first thing I filmed, but this was the time to shoot the intro. And you can see the plexi's got some cracks in it over the years. This right here by the intensity where these cracks are. As you'll see, I have some concerns about this non-original pot in here. But, you know, plexi often cracks. The cracks are almost inevitable. For those wondering, plexi does not refer to a specific circuit or a specific sound. And when people say, hey, I want that plexi sound, many of us techs roll our eyes because that could be one of 37 different circuits that all sound very different from each other, that all just happen to have plexiglass acrylic on the front panels. It is a clear piece of acrylic plastic with a black ink printed on the back. And then behind that, they put gold, slightly metallic paint so you can see through. And it has a nice gloss to it and some depth. But all it is about a 32nd of an inch thick, maybe closer to a 16th inch thick piece of plastic. Plexiglass, plexi, perspex, whatever you want to call it. There it is. There's the plexi tone right there. Look at it. Listen to it. Listen to that plexi tone. Anyway, I famously digress. It looks all original. The output transformer's got a slight lean to it, but the hardware seems tight. Always fun with these early Marshalls where the primaries on the output transformer are not covered in bell covers, and you could touch them while fumbling around behind the amp and kill yourself, or I could do it on the bench if I forget. So I take some blue painter's tape and woopa it on my jeans a few times to make it even more low tack. And then I like to cover those up just so I'm less likely to do a stupid while I'm messing with the amp. And if I reach underneath it to get a screwdriver when it's inverted on the bench, I don't want to brush anything and die. These two wires go straight to the speaker terminals, and they're connected to the secondaries here on the output transformer. It's using the 8-ohm tap. The problem with this is that these are kind of flimsy. You could break them if you tugged on this, and because it is back there connected to the speaker, eventually someone will tug on this. It's just very likely. So my preference in this situation would be to drill a small hole with a grommet to feed these wires into the chassis, and then a small hole here or here, 3/8 inch, to put a switchcraft jack so you have an actual speaker jack. So you're not going to have the stress on the speaker terminals. You're not going to have the stress on the output transformer terminals. It's the owner's choice, modify the chassis, which is really fancy, cheap aluminum bent into a U. We have to preserve that at all costs with vintage amps, or protect the output transformer, which is actually one of the things which makes this amp have whatever magic it has. So you can tell what my vote is, but my vote is just in an advisory role. I will talk to the owner. It seems to have the original power cable with an add-on British plug. This is not the original plug. It's a little screw type. These are not particularly reliable. And then he has an adapter for US use. This thing runs at 240. I've got my step-up transformer ready to go, but I'd like to replace this power cable with one with just a molded cable for US use. Now, the original power cable here is just going into a grommet, and it's got a loop tied in it on the inside. I can put a new cable in, mounted the same way. If the owner wants, I could put a cable gland on here so it's really secure. It's not really that big a deal in a combo like this. And one other option, this is not the original foot switch, you can see, and it's seen better days, and it's being held together with electrical tape, or I guess it's Gorilla Tape, a form of duct tape. But, it's not that reliable for stage use, and the wire just goes there. It's tied in a loop on the other side. I could also put a 1/4 inch jack there for a detachable foot switch connection. It's just a normally open, simple switch and a 1/4 inch connection. So these are things for the owner to decide whether he wants any modification to the chassis to make it more reliable, or just wants me to improve it while retaining little bit of the jankiness. I would certainly replace this wire with red and black. It would look and behave exactly the same, but a little bit longer just to relieve stress here. There's a little hole here. I could, if I had longer wire, I could at least zip tie the cables to there, so any stress would be eaten by a zip tie rather than here, where it makes a connection to the output transformer. So all this before we even get to see the cool stuff inside, but let's flip this over and take a look at the cool stuff inside. Down at the power end of things, you can see it's got a replaced F&T filter cap. That's good. It's got a slightly loose power switch. I can tighten that up. The standby switch seems okay. I'll check the tightness of the hardware for the power transformer. It looks a little corroded, but as long as it's mechanically fine, there's no electrical function to those screws or that hardware. Down here, someone's replaced all the caps with a mixture of Vichy and F&T and one Sprague. Everything looks okay. Replaced pot, I think. Yeah, replaced pot there on the tremolo. Not the best quality pot. I'm going to make sure that the bushing fits the opening in the chassis. Sometimes you'll get a smaller bushing than was designed for the opening and things are just kind of crammed in there. Not that optimal. But that's not one of the problems the owner was reporting. So that's while we're in the neighborhood kind of thing. Down here towards the middle, you got the Phillips mustards. You got some old ceramic discs. These disc caps sometimes develop problems over the decades. It's got a WEMA tropofoil here. One of the big Lemco, it looks like they're caps. And another WEMA there. Little touch-up solder here and there. Like this cap I don't think is original. I think they replaced probably a mustard with this WEMA. WEMA is an awesome substitute though. And some joints on the bus wire have been messed with. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Might clean up a few of them. All right, it's just a sleeve on a cap that's a little bit loose. It's got all the correct resistors that it should have from this era. And down here at the input, everything looks good. I'm not seeing any loose connections. The owner is reporting problems with channel 1. And channel 2, he says, is okay, but not sounding as good as it used to. So in a little bit, we'll fire this up and see if we can hear anything. I was hoping I'd be able to see a obvious problem, you know, especially when you have these caps kind of run across from pots to board or from one area to the next. You'll get a broken lead at a cap. That's real common with the WEMAs and the mustards and old Voxes. Right here, this Phillips mustard is probably not original to the amp because its lead ends here and it's tack soldered to a different lead that goes to the turret. That may be fine. If not, we can still get the appropriate Phillips mustard. I might even be able to get one that has the same print as the original, but you know, if that's fine, that's fine. It's not optimal to have a tack soldered thing, but we shall see. That hardware felt a little bit loose. I'll check that in a little bit. Checking the preamp tubes. I know it's got some TAD reissue EL84s and an old EZ81. Let's see what's in the preamp tubes, because if he's having problems with just this channel, this tube is the likely suspect. It is an old RCA 12AX7A. I'll put it to the side. And then we've got a Brimar ECC83. And then we've got another RCA 12AX7A. So not too shabby. I'll probably give these a clean and see if I can tighten them up a little bit. They feel physically loose, the sockets themselves. And this one is the loosest of the three. I can just feel it moving in its mount. That may or may not be a problem. I'm going to take a closer look at the other side of the wiring on this stuff I can't really see without moving the camera around. If I see something, I'll point it out to you. Well, it's not an actual, I mean, it is a problem, but it's not a glaring problem. All of the tube sockets are very, very dirty. You see that one is moving. I mentioned that one was physically loose. I'll see what I can do about that. But they're all very dirty, and when all that dust collects on there and grunge and stuff, it can get down into the socket itself. So before I even try to power this amp on, I want to clean all the sockets. That's just isopropyl. And a few places like this heater connection, got very dry solder joints, very solder starved, and some corrosion on the pin because the pin was never quite tinned. It may not be a problem now, but I don't want to do work on this 1966 Marshall, give it back, and 6 weeks later for that to choose then to fail. It reflects poorly on me, and it's easy to do while it's in the shop. I get accused of padding bills and stuff. I think those people are not serious about maintaining their gear properly. You know, this is a very nice amplifier. I think it deserves a spa treatment. I'm going to go through all the solder joints and just make sure there's nothing else I've missed. Some of the stuff is hard to show when I'm filming because I've got too many irons in the fire, but if there's anything else, I'll find it. Well, I've already gotten a few packs of Marlboros out of the tube sockets, or maybe a few cartons. A few more to go. I'm not saying that the current owner does that, but, you know, it's just the reality of our society. Most amps this old have lived through Mad Men. And I noticed this white oxide on a lot of the connections, including on the leads of many of these Phillips mustard caps, extending up to and hopefully not inside the cases where there are the slight cracks in the epoxy. Hopefully that's not a non-issue. I'm going to see if some isopropyl alcohol will get this white rust off. It's a zinc oxide thing. It's not really a problem, except it's ugly and it's really hard. Sometimes it'll disguise a poor connection. So I like to get it out of the way because it's a simple thing to do. So let me do that while I'm waiting for the tube sockets to dry up and be ready for juice. Well, everything's put back together, and this amp has got a big issue. This is the main issue the owner brought it in for. And you can also I'll also be able to demonstrate the secondary issue the owner was complaining about. The primary issue is a lot of hum, and it's audible on the vibrato channel, but it's really huge on the normal channel. And you're about to hear that, and notice that the preamp tubes for the vibrato channel and the normal channel are pulled, and we only have a phase inverter tube in place. This is a tongue saw just to make sure that the old Brimar was not the culprit. It was not. So, with nothing plugged into the amp and no preamp tube in place, this is the hum you get when you turn the volume up. It's quite a lot. So we turn that down so we don't have to hear the hum now. And the issue with this amp is the same as with a lot of vintage Marshalls. Actually, a lot of Marshalls up through the 80s and a lot of the reissues. And it's simply ground loops. I've shown this in other Marshall videos. I've even got videos on how to fix it in 2203s and 1987s and such. This is a different circuit. It's the same old issue. You've got this bus wire connecting all the pots and all the grounds from the board just randomly going to this bus wire. And over time, the pot connections to the chassis become separate but unequal due to differences in tightness and the black oxide metal washers and the aluminum panel and the steel and brass in the pots. It just, over time, you get resistance, so it's not a pure ground. And there are multiple paths to ground, so the filter cap here can go here to ground, or it can go here to ground, and a farther distance. I'm oversimplifying now. I'll put a video link in the description for the full explanation, but I need to talk to the owner and get permission to redo this bus wiring in a smarter way that'll get rid of all the hum and all of the buzz, and everything that we like about a 66 Marshall will still be there, but all that noise will be gone. To some people, this will be anathema, and they are welcome to have a vintage old buzzing humming amp. For those who want to hear what these things truly are capable of sounding like, you'll enjoy the next video in this series, and we'll also be correcting the wrong values here on the normal channel, which will make the behavior of the tone pot much more like it should be, and there will be no lack of gain. gain is good.